guns. Martinis, gadgets, and guns. First, part 1 was the discussion. Now there is the part 2. The recap. Here in the untainted cradle of Martinis, gadgets, and guns, you will be created a new super understanding. An understanding of perfect bon aficionadium. You have been selected as its progenitors, like gods. Your offsprings will return to Earth and shape it in James Bond's image. You've all served in public capacities in this show's empire. You like yourselves, will pay deference to the ultimate dynasty, which I, with others, have created. From their first day on YouTube, they will be able to log in and know that there are Hugo Drax. Fuck, I screwed it up at the end. Hugo Drax fans on the internet. Hi, Kat. Was that too much?
Yeah, a little bit because you fucked it up.
I know. I do that anyway. So.
Yeah, so remember last week when we said we were going to follow up with Your Eyes Only? Yeah, we lied. Just like Cubby lied in 77 when he said he'd do the same. We actually realized we need to do our recap of Moonraker. So once again, we're going to do Moonraker.
Well, and also last week was such a great first time, or like a first part conversation. We didn't just talk about James Bond. We talked about the nature of action movies. We talked the nature of heroes. We did get into, and Moonraker sparked that conversation. And I thought it was great, but we did miss out on the recap. And that is one of the things that we do on this show is your recaps are amazing. Like, they are absolutely the most fun. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Sometimes I look forward to the recaps more than I look forward to rewatching the movies. So and you mentioned it in mid-broadcast, by the way, if you'd like to go see that, it was with Robert Meyer Burnett over from the Post Geek Singularity. He has a Burnett work. There's a movie called Tango Shalom, but it doesn't have any James Bond. So the first episode's good. Second episode is where we tell them what the whole movie's about. Like, there are people who watch this show who don't know what it's about.
We will, but there's some news to get to first.
There is.
The weekly box office report, it's the film No Time to Die made an additional $23 million over the extended American Thanksgiving weekend, putting it
billion?
58 worldwide. What was that?
Billion?
Million?
No, did they make $1 billion?
No, I just said 758.
Damn it.
Yes, it's at that. Also, sad news. Tommy Lane has died. He was the rather understated supporting villain in Live and Let Die, Adam. And I say understated because unlike Teehee, who had the bright red blazer, the sunglasses, and the hook for a hand, or Weezer, the Weezer who drove the Pimpmobile and was a big guy who wheezes all the time, or Baron Samedi, the high voodoo priest. Or the cab driver who's just really funny.
Whisper, not Weezer.
Whisper, that's right. Whisper, who wheezes a lot. Adam was he's a normal guy. He's cool. He's slick. He's awesome. He's the one who, when they pick up Bond talking about, how nice to see you, Bond, we're going to throw you out of the plane at 10,000 feet. He's the one who reels in the bridge when Bond is stranded on the island at the Kananga's crocodile farm. He's the one who tells all the other guys that you better get your fucking asses moving or you're going to, to stop him. He's sort of more or less the main bad guy in the boat chase. He gets held up by Sheriff Pepper and just totally humiliates him and drives off in his car.
And that is the lightning rod of racism in that movie. But also, like, that is a henchman who is vying for a promotion. He was doing a good job.
He steals the sheriff's cousin's speedboat. And then he gets to be the distinction of being killed off by James Bond at the end of the chase in cool fashion. So he was always a character everybody liked, but not one, again, that immediately comes to mind. So, yeah, that is sad. 83 years old. Drink to Mr. Tommy Lane.
Oh, absolutely. Cheers.
Yes, cheers. All right. So you, interestingly, had something to bring up to me about the media release for No Time to Die.
Okay. So, how do you feel about the general presentation of physical releases of James Bond films?
For the most part, they're pretty good. I think Thunderball was particularly bad because there's several watermarks on it. There's hairs and there's dirt clods. It's like, what's this? I think movies like You Only Live Twice would not benefit from 4K. I mean, they did the first 20 films got 4K transfers for Amazon Prime in 2015. I haven't seen any of them, so I don't know what they look like. I'm assuming that they just did digital upsamples from 2K digital intermediate to 4K. But I would imagine that certain movies like You Only Live Twice may not hold up that well because the effects were already really obviously composited into the shots, or like Diamonds Are Forever when you see the ridiculousness of everybody burning down. And
Moonraker will hold up.
Moonraker will, because they did a lot of practical effects in it in the dark. It works really well. So I mean, I admit it costs roughly $100,000 per 4K scan of a film negative. And certainly MGM and Eon have the money, or Eon at least has the money to do that if they want to, because everybody is assuming that there will be a 4K box set for the 60th anniversary. Who knows? There might be. So for the most part, other than those problems, I've been really satisfied with my Bond 50 set. I like it. Now,
and that's just Blu-ray.
That's just Blu-ray.
Which I seem to be okay with older films. Like, I don't know how much more you can make it like look real, because it's like not supposed to be real. It's not like I'm watching David Attenborough.
Well, it's kind of like there was a new 4K release of Dracula, the 1931 film, and they improved upon the Blu-ray a lot because they got rid of all the flickering and all of the excess grain that you could tell they didn't actually want there. And so it actually looked substantially better than the Blu-ray counterpart. So there's things like that I guess they could fix for some of them. But regarding whether or not No Time to Die could fall victim to the recent hiccups in physical media transfers that we've seen lately, I don't think it will, because the version that they will digitally encode onto the disc is the same version that's on the PVOD release. And obviously the digital release is going to be more compressed, and that's where the problems would be if there were any. And I've watched a lot of reviews from professional critics who review these things, and the only problems they talked about with the digital release is the exact kind of things you would expect from something that's compressed onto a digital stream. There's no flapped down audio issues. It's not missing sound effects. So given that it's going to be presumably the same code or the same digital track encoded onto the disc, I think it's going to be fine. As far for that reason, I mean, I know Universal, which will be handling the distribution, did a big hiccup last year when they put out the Psycho for the first time in 4K, and the first time it was the uncut original theatrical version, because inexplicably they've been putting out the edited for TV version for 60 years, on all home media formats, until some super fans in Germany, of all places, watched it on one of their local stations and said, hey, this version's different than the one that we've been watching all these years. And it prompted them to do that, but they screwed it up and put these flapped down audio tracks on it. And it was missing effects, and they had a disc replacement program. And I was really upset because, well, they replaced my disc.
May I interrupt you?
No, I may finish the story. They replaced my disc for the Steelbook version. They would not replace my disc for the box set that I had, even though I thoroughly explained that both discs had the same problems. I was upset with that. And then that prompted a re-release of the 4K entirely in May 2021. So I now have 2 Psycho Steelbooks, which I guess is kind of cool. So now you can interrupt.
The only copy of Weekend at Bernie's that I own it was delivered by a Pizza Hut, but I'm happy with that copy. Is what I'm saying. Is like, at what point do you necessarily need Never Say Never Again in 4K? Do you need Never Say Never Again in 4K?
No, like I said, I'm really happy with my Bond 50 set, with the exception of Thunderball. If they do
wait. I apologize. I upped the ante when I should not have. Do you have Never Say Never Again in Blu-ray?
No, only on DVD.
Boom, science. I don't know why it's science, but anyway. Well, now, with previous edits of the movies as well, we've discussed those in terms of the re-releases. How do you feel about, in general, of the editing of movies throughout their re-releases?
Well, they very rarely make changes to the cuts themselves. I'm not sure.
There's only one that I can remember.
What's that?
The edit from the theatrical release of James Bond calling Quarrel "Who's the boy with Strangways." That is an obvious edit, even in the current re-releases.
What version was that? Was that on the DVD even?
Maybe the VHS, and I'm talking an early VHS. But it's a racist term.
Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't know if they tampered with it or not because I don't recall ever seeing that or hearing that, so I wouldn't know.
Fair enough. Anyway, it's just interesting. I think that when it comes to the physical media and the things, and also the mysterious Cary Fukunaga audio commentary, which, you know what, I have to say, yeah, you've seen the movie 7 times. And I've only seen the movie once, so I am very much looking forward to seeing it a second time after being an advocate for it. Heavens, what is my score for No Time to Die? I think it's nearly a 10. We'll find out later. So, but yeah.
Well, I mean, the only time there's a major difference I've heard of between edits was in the World of Wong Kar-wai box set that Criterion put out earlier this year, and he changed a lot of the color timing and just the color entirely for his movies. Like some of them he changed to like a lot of black and white segments when it used to be very colorful, or he changed the tinge from bright to dark, all sorts of things he changed. And people were in an uproar about it, and he said that his philosophy is every time you see a movie, it may be the same movie, but you're a different person each time you watch it. And therefore it didn't matter to him that he was changing it because he had a different impression of the film. Now one can argue that maybe Criterion should have included the original versions on there as well, but they're still out there. I take it that you could get them, but since that was the original author doing it and the original cinematographer didn't give a shit, so I mean, in that case, I mean, for the most part I discovered those films only through these re-edits, so I guess that maybe some people are bothered by that, kind of like when, and I think it was 1988, George Lucas went to Congress and he was advocating for the preservation of original films in their original format. They shouldn't be they shouldn't be preserving the versions that are edited for television, if you will. And a lot of people saw that as hypocritical when he went back and made the special editions of Star Wars and refused to release the original theatrical cuts, which is true. But in general, I don't feel, other than that one example you cited for the Bond franchise, I don't see that as something affecting it. I mean, what I do kind of find annoying is that when TV shows or streamers will, for a gimmick, they'll say, oh, this is the extended version. Like Casino Royale has an extended version, apparently, which is only like probably not even a minute longer. I think it's mostly for the stairwell fight. It's a little bit more brutal, or maybe the bathroom fight as well. And I'm like, I don't really care. I had an opportunity to watch it on a streamer a long time ago, and I never got around to it. It's like if the director cut it a certain way or had the editor cut it a certain way, they should leave it at that instead of just adding it, unless it was cut by the censors.
Wait, Kat. You know what? You know how they make it longer? When James Bond picks up the guy's wife in Casino Royale and they're looking at each other across the DB5 or whatever car, they just play that more. It just goes. It's an awkwardly long scene to begin with, and so they just keep doing it for another 2 minutes or so.
Why?
Just to fill time.
Well, we don't need
anyway. No, I know we don't. LDG and Sherry are both ahoying.
Ahoy.
Hey, you don't have to say that. You can say your own thing. So anyway, Kat, have you ever seen Moonraker?
I have seen it. I did not rewatch it for this week. I watched it last week and I watched it in August as well. So I feel I'm pretty well ready for it.
I grew up with it. So let's go. Let's play.
All right. So we have our gun barrel. Kind of refreshing to go back through these older movies and watch all the classic gun barrel because we haven't been getting that lately.
Yeah.
So
and also it's classic soundtrack as well. It's not the wiki.
Yeah. So the film starts with this really absurdist scene where we have one of Hugo Drax's space shuttles being transported by a jumbo jet to England, and that's not the part that's ridiculous. What's ridiculous is that there are these two hooligans hiding inside the shuttle. They get out of these secret compartments, and because these shuttles are just, of course, magically filled with fuel and ready to go, they're
rockets. Come on.
Yeah, they just flip the ignition and they take off. It's a glider, so really there's nowhere for it to go, but it just takes off and completely blows up the plane. And what admittedly is not the best miniature type effects job, but whatever. So the shuttle takes off, and it's like, wow, bam. So then we cut straight to MI6 at M's office, and he's being told over the phone about what happened. And so the door happens to be open, so he looks straight at Moneypenny. He's like, "Where's Bond? I need him here now." And she's like, "Oh, he's just on the last leg of his latest mission." And so, of course, it cuts to a close-up shot of Bond feeling up this lady's legs aboard a boat.
Okay, before we get to the feeling up of ladies' legs, let's also take a moment's notice that this is the last Bernard Lee.
Right, we haven't gotten to that last scene yet for him, and then we'll bring that.
No,
up.
I know, but I don't want to forget.
We're not going to forget about it.
Okay.
So I'm not going to forget. So Bond's feeling up this girl's leg. They're on a private jet. They're flying over Lake Berryessa, which is not far from me. I don't know if it was supposed to be standing in for that. They never really said. So he's on the jet, and they're having a good time. And then suddenly she just kind of gets up from the couch, and the pilot walks out of the cockpit. He's getting his parachute on. He's got a gun on Bond. And I love how Roger Moore is just totally cool with this. He doesn't even skip a beat, doesn't flinch, whatever. He's kind of doing the whole charmer thing. But then, of course, Bond decides to spring into action, and he attacks the pilot. They get into a good fight, ending with Bond nearly does get pushed out of the plane without a parachute by the pilot, but then Bond gets the upper hand at the last second and gets this guy in the gut and then throws him out of the plane. And he looks down and he kind of smiles like, "Oh, I've got this." And then out of the blue, returning from The Spy Who Loved Me in the ocean, where man bit shark, Jaws is back and pushes Bond out of the airplane.
Over land, sea, or air.
Yes, and who knows where he was on that very tiny airplane. He certainly wasn't in the cockpit, and he wasn't hiding in the luggage compartment.
And he was in the loo.
Yeah, and so Bond is falling from the sky, and so he starts doing this neat thing where he's like trying to. It's like he figures if he straightens out enough, he'll catch up with the pilot, because the pilot's flying, and then Bond's like going like this, and his arms behind him to pick up speed. He catches up to the guy, and what's really awesome about this is that they did these stunts for real. It's BJ Worth. He's wearing a parachute underneath his actual outfit with the other parachute on it. And I can't remember the other stuntman's name, but through 88 jumps, they did this whole scene. And Bond wrestles the parachute away from the pilot, kicks him away, and then you have the Wilhelm scream, of course, as the guy's falling to his death. Bond gets the parachute on, and then out of the blue, Jaws suddenly shows up, and he's doing the same thing, like streaking his arms out, trying to catch up with him. He does, and he grabs onto Bond's leg and is about to bite him with his steel teeth. And Bond does the smart thing, which the pilot should have done, which is he just immediately pulls the cord of his chute. And so Bond is saved, and Jaws, when he pulls the cord on his chute, it doesn't work. Maybe it's one of the fake ones from the D.B. Cooper thing. So he's falling like a rock, and then in a really comical thing where they, once again, the weird thing that this movie does a lot is changing tone. It goes from being a really cool action scene to being this goofy thing where you see this circus and there's trapeze artists, and Jaws is like doing this thing where he's like literally his fingers are like this, and he's literally flapping like a bird, like he's going to catch up with this tent, and he lands on it, but you see him kind of fall towards the tent, and then it cuts to like the main titles where you see like the silhouette of Jaws spinning around until you have this weird full-on shot of the silhouette of Jaws' crotch taking up like the whole screen as he's lying there on the net. And then we see again to the main titles. Shirley Bassey's Moonraker song. I love it. It's really good.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But it kind of undercuts, like when you have Jaws doing the whole flapping until he hits a airbag. And also, this is the point in the movie where we're supposed to suspend our disbelief. But anyway, it undercuts Shirley Bassey's melodic Moonraker theme. I enjoyed the Moonraker theme.
I did too. It's really good.
Yeah, there's a disco version.
Yeah. So she sings a song, and then we come out of the main titles, and we're back at Moneypenny's office, and Bond walks in, and she asks, "Well, what took you so long, James?" He's like, "Well, sorry, I took a fall without a parachute," or whatever the line is. So then he goes into M's office to find that there's M, Q, and the defense secretary, and they're talking to him about the destruction of the jet that was transporting the Moonraker shuttle for Britain. And Q shows him these.
We found the fuselage.
Yes, we found the fuselage, and you see the photos of the crash site. But M insists, or Q rather insists, that there's no sign of the Moonraker shuttle. And Bond's like, "What are you suggesting, that someone hijacked it in midair?" And M's like, "That's precisely what we want you to find out, 007. So he's like, "Oh, Drax Industries owns it, right?" He's like, "Yes." He's like, "Okay." So Bond turns to leave, and Q stops him. He's like, "Hey, not so fast." And Q pulls out this nice little, what looks like a little jewelry box, and he opens it. And it's got what looks like a wristwatch, but it has like a dart gun instead of a watch attached. And he puts it on Bond's wrist, and he explains that All you have to do is squeeze your wrist muscles to fire it. He has armor-piercing darts as well as cyanide capsule darts, and he's trying to explain how it works. And Bond's like, "Oh, like this there." And he squeezes it, and he shoots the portrait on M's wall, which is of whoever it is riding their horse, and it shits right into the horse's ass. And M is like, "Oh, thank you, 007," which is just really kind of an odd reaction. It's like, okay. So Bond leaves, and he goes to, and it cuts to him arriving at LAX. He gets picked, and it's kind of neat to see LAX back then because the airport wasn't completely built up everywhere.
Cat. It's pronounced lax.
No. So you see that it's like a lot of empty field stuff. Like, wow, this is kind of neat. So he gets in a helicopter where he's picked up by Corinne, one of Drax's servants, assistants, or what have you. And she, they take off in the helicopter, and they go a ridiculously long way. From the looks of it, the miniatures that were built, the Moonraker manufacturing center for Drax Industries looks like it's somewhere out in like Palmdale or Palm Springs or Death Valley, like way out in the desert. But then when they pass over it and keep going to where his estate is, the matte painting they use makes it look like it's north of the San Gabriel Mountains, as if it's at the southern end of the California Great Valley. So I don't know what the frick's going on with the geography.
Oh, and it does not hold up. The matte painting does not hold up. And but I do understand the geography to a certain extent. Like if he transported like a French castle brick by brick, as Corinne says, then I'm pretty sure he could water the grounds to make cedar trees or whatever.
Oh, that's not the issue that I have with it. There's plenty of real estate out there where you could do that. The issue is that it looks from the topography of the land surrounding the estate in the matte painting that they're north of the San Gabriel Mountains, where the actual manufacturing center looked like it was out in like Death Valley, south of there. So whatever. So this mansion, by the way,
I don't know California as well.
I know you don't. So this real place is a chateau located approximately 35 miles southeast of Paris. The interiors were shot at a separate chateau about in somewhere north of Paris. So they land the helicopter, and Bond sees that there's a bunch of other like really supermodel type people working out and doing all these crazy exercises. It's like, oh, whatever. And they get out of the helicopter, and he gets taken into the chateau, and he's first going to go meet Drax. And we see Drax, and it's a French chateau, so it's a wealth like insane. And Bond even mentions to him at some point that, oh, if he's gonna bring this to stay here brick by brick, he'd probably be one to buy the Eiffel Tower. And she's like, he did. They just wouldn't grant him an export permit to transfer it out here. And he's like, oh, how surprising. So
I'm surprised he didn't kill France.
Yeah, so it's funny you should say that. So Bond is brought into the drawing room where you have the great introduction for a Bond villain. Hugo Drax, played by Michael Lonsdale, sitting at his piano, grand piano, he's playing music. He's got these two Rottweilers, and his servant Cha comes in, and Drax gets like these two big steaks, and he throws them down to the dogs, and they don't do anything. They're just kind of looking at it, whatever. Bond sits down with Drax. He offers him tea, and then eventually Drax just snaps his finger, and the dogs eat the meat. And it's funny, Drax makes mention of the fact that Bond and his people, the British people's contribution to Western society, afternoon tea, which tells you a bit of how little he thinks of the outside world, if you will, which is like setting little hints for what Drax might be up to. But
Catherine, may I press you to a cucumber sandwich?
No, thank you. I'm not having.
Because they're bland. Why would you put cucumbers on bread? Fuck you.
I don't know. And I should mention that his manservant Chang, pronounced Cha, is actually played by Toshiro Tuda, who was the martial arts instructor for Michael G. Wilson, one of the co-producers on the film, who of course is still there today. And so he thought it would be really cool to give him a role in the movie, and I thought that was actually kind of awesome. And I think he's also a villain who, in a sense, gets overshadowed by Jaws, just because of how famous Jaws is. But I think Jaws is pretty cool too. So,
you know what? I mentioned in the other discussion about Moonraker in part 1 that I thought that he was delightful just by his vocalizations. Jaws is not a person who makes noise, but Cha did, and I loved the noises.
Yes. So
when he was attacking, it was just like, yeah, and it was great.
So Bond offers his apologies for losing. Drax actually instigates the apology, saying, "Oh, you should be come to apologize for losing my shuttle." which is really full of himself, given the revelation of that mystery later in the film. And so Bond's like, oh yes, a formal apology will be given, blah blah blah. And he's like, oh, can I interest you in a tour? He's like, oh, of course. So Corinne shows back up and he's like, okay, take Mr. Bond on a tour. Go introduce him to Dr. Goodhead. He's like, oh, okay. So they leave the room, and as they're leaving, Drax takes a sip of his tea and turns to Cha. He's like, Cha, take care of look after Mr. Bond. See that some harm comes to him. And I'm guessing the reason for this is because, as Drax said, Bond's reputation precedes him, and I assume he thinks that if we can off him and make it look like an accident, it won't matter if they send a replacement who's suspicious, because they're not going to be anywhere near good as James Bond, and they won't be able to figure out what we're doing, which is probably the logic here.
But also, in movie, like, I think we can both agree that Stromberg was a pretty piss-poor villain, except for being bad guy. And I appreciate the fact that they introduced the villain so right off the top. They did not hide. There was no getting around to the villain. It was just like, villain.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you just get it. And so so he goes to, and this is another thing. So they get back in the helicopter, and they fly back to the manufacturing center, which again is an insane distance away. Corinne walks Bond inside, and he looks at the facility. He's like, oh, people say Hugo Drax wants to conquer space. Now I believe him. And she's like, oh, you'll find Dr. Goodhead in here. He's like, okay. So he goes into the office, and he sees this woman like writing.
Wait. Yeah, okay, no, you're right. Sorry.
He's writing on the chalkboard, and admittedly, it looks like she's dressed in almost like a outdoor trench coat type raincoat thing or whatever. And so he kind of dismisses it and doesn't think she's the doctor. And she turns around, and she's like, oh, can I help you? He's like, I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead. Oh, you just found her. And Bond, and this weird surprise look.
A woman.
Exactly. And I'm like, it's 1979. Okay, 78 when they filmed it, but really? I mean, it's just.
Do you not remember your dead wife?
Yes.
Like, it is. Yeah. It like strong women are not. He's strangely misogynistic in this film.
Yeah, and it didn't really make sense because Roger. I mean, yeah, he, what is it like? He threatened Rosie Carver and twisted Miss Anders' arm. But to be that surprised about a woman having that standing is very off-key for this movie.
A woman with education? Shy.
Yeah, so Holly agrees to take Bond on a tour, and one of the first.
Holly takes offense. Holly takes offense to James Bond being like.
Oh yeah, he says, "Oh, your powers of observation serve you well, Mr. Bond." So she decides to take him on a tour. And one of the first places she takes him, and I think she takes him here specifically as like an FU to his reaction of being a woman. The first place she takes him is the centrifuge testing. It's just to test out the G-force. And she's like, okay, there's a chicken switch here. Most people don't pass out to 7 or 8 Gs. Have fun. And then she closes it and leaves. But Bond notices as it's getting started that Cha goes into the main control room and whispers in this guy's ear and tells him to.
So Cha, anyway, she'll be back. Don't worry. You're just stuck with me for a second. So anyway, so Cha has this centrifuge going, and it's got no, wait, Kat, I got to do this part. Yeah, of course. But okay, so Cha has James Bond going through the centrifuge. They call off Dr. Goodhead. And it's James Bond, and he's stuck in this centrifuge, and someone's going to kill him with it. It feels very much like Thunderball on the rack, but anyway, he remembers he's got this nerve dart shoot thing that Q gave him that he shot a horse's ass with. So anyway, he shoots it into the controls, and apparently that stopped a centrifuge. Kat. You're back.
Yeah.
The very next day.
Cha was trying to kill him by turning it up really, really high.
I think I said that.
I don't know if I was. It kicked me. StreamYards kicked me off. So anyway, she comes back in there and sees what happened, and it's not clear how she immediately knows that there was a problem because she wasn't even in the room, and it just looks still normal, like it's just slowing down. But she already immediately knows that there's a problem. She opens the door. She's like, oh, I don't know what could have happened. Something must have gone wrong with the controls.
And all James Bond has to do is look up at the person who's making the controls work, and he's like, I bet it's that guy.
Yeah, and he doesn't say it. maybe that's because he already suspects that Drax is responsible for his own shuttle disappearance, and he doesn't want to get the beautiful, lovely staff members in trouble. But
well, also he still wants to have sex with Holly Goodhead.
Yeah, and that name, my God, they think they're so cheeky with their names. It's like,
and that's the funny part about him discovering that Holly Goodhead or Dr. Goodhead is a woman. Like, does that mean that if it was a man, it would have been a stereotypical, like, what would a dude Dr. Goodhead look like?
Exactly. And so he goes back to his room at night, and he sneaks into Corinne's room. And Corinne's like, "Oh, Mr. Bond, you shouldn't be here." And because she had mentioned that I think it was her grandmother had told her about, how to conduct yourself type of thing and these rules. And he's like, "Oh," and she starts taking to Bond's, seduction of her. And he's like, "Oh, what about your grandmother's rules or whatever?" She's like, "I never learned to read." And so they make out. And she then does what Bond really wants her to do, which is to take her in. And that's funny because that's another misogynistic bit where he comes into the room when he first greets her, and he just assumes automatically that, oh, she wants me, and he starts kissing her, and she kind of was taken aback by that, and that's where he mentioned the thing about her grandmother's rules, and then she mentioned that line, and it's like, yes, she kind of wanted to make out with him because she does, but the fact that I like that she's proper enough that she's like, "Hey, man, you didn't even ask," which again is not something that the Roger Bond usually does, so it's a bit weird. Do you think so?
I think it's completely out of character. He's very aggressive, and especially, again, watching these in order, he was a spy for a while, but now he's a Lothario?
Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but something about this movie just makes him be like...
So, here's another thing. So she, then because Bond wants her to, takes her into the side room where Drax has a safe. And it's under the clock on the wall, as she told him about. So he uses this little gadget to, get the lock open, and he takes out some papers and he opens them, and it's the blueprints for this weird spherical type device, and it says Vanini glass on it and with the address for Venice, Italy. And Bond takes a bunch of pictures of the secret camera, and he doesn't really take much care, you'll notice, to put the papers back in the safe in the exact spot in the safe where they were. You'll notice that he just kind of puts it in there and closes it. And for that matter, since Drax knew that Shaw had failed to kill Bond earlier in the day, and Drax only again wanted to kill Bond because he knew his reputation preceded him, you would think that if he had very incriminating evidence of sorts, that he would probably have taken it out of the safe or had it under close guard with Bond's around. Because you see that after Bond gets these papers and he takes the pictures and goes to leave, that Shaw's waiting outside. He knows what he's done.
But no, you're not asking the important questions.
What?
Where did Corinne get that night dress?
That's not an important question. I'm sure that...
I'm just saying she looked good. It was great. I didn't care what was going on in the scene. There was like some kind of 3D X-ray thing.
Did you pay attention to the attire she was wearing in the helicopter?
Well, I sure as hell wasn't paying attention to Roger Moore.
That's what I mean. You remember the dress she was wearing in the helicopter. So they dressed pretty snazzily like in this movie.
Well, it's a James Bond movie. The ladies look good. So does Roger Moore.
Right, so that's not a question then that she has the night dress. So anyway.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like, is that her house? Does she have a closet where she can get one?
Obviously, they're the servants at Drax's estate.
This Drax guy sounds like a great employer.
He does. But again, it's like you knew that Bond is here to investigate. And yeah, let's just leave these papers in here. And Shaw knows what he's done. He's a smart guy. He sees Bond leave, and he doesn't bother attacking him at that moment. He presumably goes to tell Drax what happened. So the next morning, when Drax and all these other men, we're not exactly sure who they are, but they're all like shooting pheasants, which I've never understood the joy in that. I just watched a movie before this, Gosford Park, where they're shooting pheasants. It just looks so boring. I don't really get it, but whatever. So they're shooting.
You've never known the thrill of murder?
You're just standing somewhere and other people are doing the calls to shoot the pheasants. That seems kind of lazy, but whatever.
Well, you have to aim.
Yeah, but you might as well just be shooting skeets then, because there's more of a. I'd imagine there's a bit more of a challenge because whatever. So anyway,
Drax wants to kill a lot of things.
Yes. Yeah, so when Bond is being driven up to this shooting area which is in the clearing of all the trees that are planted on the hillside, all the other men suddenly leave except for Drax, Cha, and a couple other guys. And Drax
guy in the tree.
Yes, Drax tells the one guy, nods to him, and the guy nods back, and he goes to get up in the tree. Bond shows up. He gives Bond a gun, and they make a little small chit chat, and Bond's gonna shoot, and he's lining up the shot, and he misses, and Drax is like, "Oh, pity, Mr. Bond," and then the gunman falls out of the tree, and he's like, "Pity that you missed." And he's like, Bond's like, "Did I?" And he gives the gun back to Drax. I'm like, wait a minute.
Why did Drax give him the gun in the first place?
Yeah, why didn't you just shoot him? It's like everybody here, as we find out in the film, is in on it. It's not like he would call the cops. So why?
Drax could literally have stabbed him between the ribs and it would all be over.
He could have had Chaw seek the dogs on it before he gave him the gun and it would all be over. It's like, what the hell?
Dear God. Like, they shrug off. It's like, I tried to kill you. I know, so I killed your assassin. What up?
Yeah, he would just tell MI6, sorry, that there was an accident with the dogs or he accidentally got shot. There'd be nothing suspicious, but whatever. So they let Bond leave. And as he leaves in the car, Corinne shows up in the golf cart. Because she's been summoned there apparently by Drax. And he says, without even looking at her face, "Oh, you showed Mr. Bond the safe." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did. Your employment has now been terminated. You get your things and leave the premises immediately." And she's like, "Oh, no." He's like, "Go away." And so she's depressed. She turns to leave. But before she gets to the golf cart, Drax just turns straight to Chaw. And he's like, snaps his fingers again. Chaw brings the dogs. And this is a really great scene where... Amazing. She doesn't bother getting back into the golf cart, probably, which makes sense because they're not as maneuverable or as fast. So she runs into the woods. And this is shot really well with the cinematography. The way you get the dark and get some light shafts coming through. And the dogs are catching up. They mix in a little bit of slow motion. It's really good. And as a little kid seeing this for the first time, I just hoped and assumed that she was going to, because she was running in the woods, she was going to come upon the path where Bond's car was. And that he would save her. But no, she ends up getting felled by the dogs at a really great final shot where she sort of falls almost in slow motion as the dogs are like falling on her. I'm like, man, this is really, again, totally
attack. It's crazy.
It is. It's like totally crazy.
It looks great. It's like a Hammer horror movie. It looks British. It was filmed in France. I think this is the first movie that wasn't filmed at Pinewood. And so this was mostly a French production. And yeah, it did have sort of that sort of French cinema vibe.
Well, that's why Michael Lonsdale and Corinne Dufour, the actress playing Corinne, got cast in the film because
they're French.
Well, they got cast because France's policy is that you needed to have some French actors in notable roles in the film because they didn't want to make this in England because of the tax hikes. And so originally the role of Drax was supposed to go to James Mason from movies like North by Northwest or whatnot, but they couldn't because of this policy. And so, but I think it works because I think Michael Lonsdale is amazing. So that's how that happened. And so after this sequence, we cut to Venice. Bond, strangely,
Venice.
You would have thought that he would have gone back to MI6 first and told them, okay, by the way, Drax's manservant tried to kill me inside the centrifuge thing, and I found the suspicious evidence, and he tried to kill me again when we were outside with the pheasant hunting, and
it'll be fine.
Yeah, so he goes to Venice, and he goes to the Vanini glass, and it's kind of funny that he actually goes so far as to go all the way to Venice, shows up at the plaza. He's literally standing outside the building with it says Vanini glass, and he has to check the address again, as if it's like, really, you would have gone this whole way without knowing the address or knowing if that was the name, but okay. That's pretty funny. So he walks inside, and we see this woman sitting at the desk, and there's actually a neat running gag throughout the movie where each of the women you see working all over the world for Drax will end up showing up later at the end of the film, which is actually kind of cool. A detail that I missed initially. So he walks in, he's asking about the glass, blah, blah, blah. She's like, oh, yeah, I can go in the back. So Bond goes into the back, and he walks through. You pass all the guys making the glass. It's really neat to see. And he ends up in the museum section where he sees Dr. Holly Goodhead walking amongst the museum tourists, pretending to be one of the tourists, but she kind of sidles away from that and goes into one of the hallways and is trying to do some spying. And Bond kind of follows her discreetly. And these two scientists in lab coats go by, and they go inside this side lab, and she's unable to follow them. But Bond has discreetly heard what's going on, and so he finally decides to approach her.
Well, at this point, we don't think that Holly Goodhead is doing much spying. She's an agent of Hugo.
Well, I don't know. I honestly thought it was a bit suspicious that she was there with a tour group, and she kind of slinkles off to go do this. I mean, I know they haven't revealed anything about her true allegiances yet, but I thought even as a little kid watching it, there was something odd about that. So Bond finally confronts her. She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm giving a lecture tonight at 6. You should come by." And Bond's like, "Oh okay, I will." Blah blah. Lie. So he leaves her, and for reasons I'm still not sure how this happens, but he ends up in a gondola, and he's being taken along through the canals, and this hearse gondola passes by, and this guy rises out of the coffin and throws a knife at Bond's gondola driver, killing him. Bond fights back and hits the guy, and it begins this awkward chase sequence. And it's awkward because why is Bond been given this gizmo gondola? Why is he driving around in the middle of the day? If he's not going to snoop around the glass store until later tonight, then why is he even driving around the canals? And why would Drax decide to put henchmen inside this a hearse, like a dummy hearse? It's so weird and just too convoluted. Okay,
but you do get it. You do get to a certain point where it's like, move.
Yes, and so the gondola takes off, and there's this gag where there are these two lovers in one of the boats, and the gondola speeds by and cuts the boat in half, and the guy who's steering the boat, of course, falls in the water and sinks. So the couple are just kissing and not paying attention, and Bond's being chased by this motorboat with guys with machine guns. And as ridiculous as this next bit is, it kind of makes sense. Bond's plan to avoid these guys is, I'm going to do something to draw all this attention on me, so these guys can't really get away with shooting me without getting caught. So he drives the gondola up into the main plaza there. I can't remember the name of this plaza. Famous plaza in Venice in a lot of movies. And everybody's looking around.
The Cheektowaga Galleria.
Yes, that's it. So he's driving through and you see this ridiculous triple take by a pigeon. You see this dog kind of stoically looking at him. And
some guy decides to quit drinking wine for the second time.
Yes, it's the Italian first assistant director as another in joke. There's another guy who's pouring wine for a customer, and he's distracted and spills wine all over him. There's another guy who's like painting something, and he goes to paint the paint, but Bond accidentally knocked it out of the way with a gun. See all these silly little gags, culminating in the two gunmen on the speedboat deciding, we got to get out of here. And the driver guns the boat too quickly, causing the other gunman to fall off the boat in the water, but he leaves him behind and takes off. And then Bond eventually leaves the plaza back into the water, and that's really it. Like, this action scene seems like it's just randomly there for the sake of having an action scene. It really serves no purpose in the film. And so that night, Bond sneaks back into the Vanini Glass headquarters. He sneaks into the back. He remembers the code to get in. It's a nod to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, because aside from ripping on Star Wars, we got to riff on the other sci-fi film of that year.
Oh, but I do appreciate the slow escalation of sci-fi elements to this James Bond movie. I know that it has been equated, but I do like the escalation. So bringing me in with Close Encounters is a nice way to do it. As an older viewer, when I was a kid, I just thought it was a great tune.
Right, and so Bond goes into this room that he's got access to, and there's a little voyeur sort of thing where he's protected in the sealed-off room with the control panels, and he's hiding, and he sees these scientists in the laboratory, and they're messing around with these big spheres that Bond saw the blueprints for. They're tampering with it, and they got all these chemistry sets, blah, blah, blah. It's like Bond's kind of watching, wondering what's going on, and they run a test, and the poison they're running doesn't kill the rats, the mammals, and their scientists are kind of happy with this or whatnot. And once the scientists leave the room, Bond sneaks in to see what's going on, and he goes over to one of these big green, sphere things, and he pulls one of the vials out of it, and he's examining it, but he sits it. He forgets to, once again, Bond forgets to put things back where they belong. He sits it on the edge there, runs to hide back inside the airtight room. The scientists come back in, and they accidentally knock the thing over. It breaks, and it fills the room with toxic nerve gas, which kills the scientists in brutal fashion.
Wait, stop.
What?
I'm gonna have to go back through all of the movies before this and find out how many times James Bond didn't put things back where they belong, because I think that is a James Bond trope, and you just pointed it out, and I'm going to look for it in the future. Thank you, Kat. This is why I watch this show. Continue.
So Bond leaves the lab, and then we cut to Holly Goodhead, who's standing on the veranda of the balcony of her hotel room, and she goes back inside, the lights are off, and she reaches over to turn on the light, and there's a close-up shot of Bond grabbing her arm, and he's like, aha! And it's like, what the fuck was that? And then he turns the light on, and it's like, why?
It's a weird jump scare for no reason.
Yeah, and he turns on the light, and it's revealed that, Bond kind of sees that oh, she's on the run to get out of here. She's got all of her suitcases packed up, and Bond pretends not to notice. And oh, my talk went fine. She's trying to downplay everything, and Bond can tell obviously at this point that she's not who she says she is, but he doesn't really push her that hard to find out.
Well, no, he pushes her rather hard. He's James Bond.
Well, sort of. Yeah, so they have kind of, a night about it, and he realizes that she's CIA and that she's been undercover for who knows how long at this point. But she's like insisting that she's going to leave tonight, and he still has some investigating to do, so he's not really going to press.
Oh, no, but you skipped over like all the gadgets that Holly Goodhead has.
That's true. She does have some gadgets that Bond kind of...
Hey, James Bond kills a python with a pen with some sort of weird, virulent poison. It just goes into pythons and kills them. No, I know, but I'm just saying we get a pen with a syringe. We get like a radio purse. We get a flamethrower perfume bottle. Oh, there's another one too. Someone shoots a dart as well.
Right, and there's something I forgot to mention. Before he made it to the lab, when he was sneaking around Vanini Glass, he did encounter Cha again. And they got in a big fight. Like a bull in a china shop thing, where you see Cha in his martial arts gear, and he says all those shouting that you liked so much.
We skipped over the fight. No, you know what? You can't spoil it. Like, they get into a fight. Go watch it. Just go watch the movie. It's amazing.
I kind of felt this fight went on a little long, and it just goes on and on. Eventually, they go into the attic where you see all these big boxes tagged for Destination Rio de Janeiro, and it's like they accidentally knock into one of the boxes, and we see the green, weird spheres inside
with the nerve gas still in it.
Yes, and at this point, we didn't know they were nerve gas because I forgot that this fight took place before he got to the lab. So anyway, the fight ends with Bond throwing Cha outside this clock face, and he falls and crashes into a grand piano during this outdoor performance of whatever at this restaurant, and he looks at him lying there, and he's like, play it again, Sam.
I hate that line.
Yeah, so that was the fight scene that I forgot to mention. Yeah, then he went in the lab, blah, blah. So he's with Holly. He sees all her gadgets. He realizes she's CIA, and she doesn't really want to talk about it, and he's not going to he figures it out, so he figures he'll just kind of, he has a good idea of where she's going because he's already seen the boxes tagged for Rio. So he's not going to push it too hard, just far enough so he can sleep with her. Or that he can try to do that anyway. So the next day, Bond meets with, has M and the defense secretary show up because he's told them since about the discoveries in the laboratory. And they think this is kind of incredulous. And the defense secretary's like, how could this be? Hugo Drax, I play chess with him or whatever. And this can't Bridge, that's right. I play bridge with him. So they get to the Vanini
Which is a direct nod to the book.
Yeah, they get to the Vanini Glass, and there's already police there, and they escort him in. They get to the lab, and Bond has them put on gas masks that an officer is waiting to give them there. And in a ridiculous bit, they go inside the lab, and the entire room has been changed into another glorious chateau-like room where Drax is once again playing a piano. It's like, wait a minute. There's literally no way this could have happened. This is like the disappearing room trick. I don't get it.
I recommend just watching that scene again when those doctors, when they pass through the doors within that room, when it is all scienced Andromeda strained up.
Yeah.
The architecture of that room still exists beyond the scientific stuff. I looked for it specifically because that had always bothered me. And I looked and I was like, no, I buy it.
They still had to get all that shit out of there. There's no like big gargantuan doors to smuggle this crap.
No, but there are columns, and if you look, the architecture of the room fits.
Okay, so yeah, they inexplicably got all the shit out within a matter of like a night.
The speed that they do work is great. I can't believe. Wait until we get to the rocket ships.
Drax is there and he greets them, and they're really embarrassed. So they take the gas masks off, and of course, the defense secretary, having no faith in 007, just insists that he's wrong. He should be taken off the case, blah, blah, blah. He leaves. But M, in a very nice moment, actually sticks up for Bond once again. And he says, hey, Bond saw it. I believe him. And once the defense secretary storms off, M asks him, what's going on? Well, I guess I have no choice. I have to take you off the mission. But where are you going to go these next few days? And Bond's like, I might be going to Rio. And he says, here, have Q analyze this. And he gives him one of the vials that Bond did smuggle out of the lab. And M's kind of nods to him, kind of like, slyly, like, thank you, kind of thing. And so, so Bond then takes off for Rio de Janeiro. And he takes off for Rio, and he first meets up with a woman. I can't remember her name.
Claire. Let's call her Claire.
Right. So they go to. So she's like his MI6 contact there. She takes.
Do you want me to look it up? I can look it up.
You could do that. Yeah. So they go to the this really nice hotel. I actually really like this place. And she's like, "Oh, I'm there to look after you, Mr. Bond," and he's really happy. And he's gonna like romance her or whatever. And she's like, "Yeah, I could take you to where." He's asking about the Drax shipment specifically. She's like, "Oh yeah, I could take you there tonight," because they've already acted on his information that he gave to M, which is how they know about this. So that night there's a huge parade going on, like a big festival, street fair, kind of reminiscent of Thunderball. And while they're going
very much so.
Yeah, so while they're going through the crowd, you see this guy in a clown costume.
Cat. Sorry, Cat. And as the man in the clown costume approaches Emily Bolton as Manuela,
that's it. So he approaches Manuela. They pass through him, and a few times you see him, the guy in the clown suit. You don't really think much of it. And I guess this is the moment where I forgot to mention that precisely because of the trouble Bond caused in Venice, Drax got on the phone with people we still don't know who they are. And he's like, "Well, we need somebody. I need help." But he's like,
Spectre.
"Oh, if we can get him, probably if we can get him to help." And then it cuts straight to a little cutscene of Jaws at the airport going through metal detector, and it alerts, and the TSA is like, "I see." So then he just smiles at him with his teeth, and the reaction from the TSA agent is ridiculously, cartoonishly exaggerated. So Jaws is here apparently.
Jaws is back.
Yes. So Bond and Manuela get out of the crowd to walk down this alley, and as they are, there's this big wide shot as they're escaping leaving the parade, and we see that the clown suit, which is not so much a clown suit, it's like a bit of a clown costume and almost like a big piñata head type thing, and the face, instead of having eye holes, it's like a little square bit in the neck for the guy to look out through, and he just stops and is just staring at him. It's so creepy, and nobody else in the parade seems to notice or care that the clown guy's just stopped. But
it's a dead alley when he first approaches.
Right, but I mean, he's still standing in the crowd when he stops just to watch them. He hasn't even left the parade yet. And so as Bond and her go into the alley, Bond tells her to stay put. He climbs up the fire escape to sneak into this building where he finds evidence of the box. Okay, the shipments have been there. It's the same stuff from Venice, the globes. And he sees that they all have these proper stickers on it, that they're going to be shipped out again at a separate airport, which I'm guessing that means that, because I'm trying to figure out, because if they shipped them out of Venice and are going to ship them again from the airport to the Amazon jungle, then why did they ever leave the airport to begin with? Wouldn't they just land there to refuel on his plane and then maybe swap planes to take out? Like, why is it being taken into the city and stored at this facility? I don't really know. So that was a little weird. So as Bond is investigating this,
like, I don't claim to be an expert of the Drax Industrial Multinational Corporation.
I don't either. It's just weird. So we cut to the clown guy again, and he's coming down the alley. And this is, again, a really great scene. It's building all this tension as this guy's walking closer and closer. And Manuela's kind of freaking out because it's like, well, Bond told me to stay put, and I shouldn't leave. And finally he catches up with her. He takes off the head, and we
catches up with her. She doesn't move.
Wait, what's I mean? He takes off the mask, and we see that it's Jaws. He smiles at her, and he goes in to do his Count Dracula routine, and that's when all these party people show up. And he decides to pick her up and dance with her. Hey! And they're all freaking out and dancing. And there's only like 5 people here. And the alley was pretty quiet a second ago, but now suddenly it's inexplicably loud, and she doesn't seem to scream at all. They keep on going. She doesn't try and reach and grab onto anybody. They just keep on going. And again, this is a thing where they totally ruin what was a great scene. It was building up this really really great tension, and they turn it into this goofy dance number. Bond finally comes out of the window.
I disagreed with you before, and I disagree with you again. Part of the terror of the situation is that I think that she was screaming, but we weren't allowed to hear it as an audience because no one in the crowd heard it. I think that it was the terror of a woman being assaulted and taken away without anyone caring. Well, I thought it was terrifying.
I didn't, because the alley was dead quiet beforehand when it was just her and Bond in there, so it didn't really track that suddenly it's too difficult to hear. But anyway,
so Bond saves what I found out what her name was. Manuela. So Bond jumps on Jaws and saves Manuela.
Yeah, and he sees Jaws and he recognizes him, and he kind of smiles at him like, "Oh, ha, you again." And Bond even smiles at him, and they get saved because a bunch of other people come into the alley and just sort of mob Jaws and start pushing him down the alley. And Bond.
Well, how many people? How many people do you expect him to kill?
Well, no, not that he would kill him, but I meant that they kind of mob. It's kind of funny. They all mob him and start taking him away, and Bond and Manuela actually stay there for quite a period of time before he says, "Okay, I'll get you out of here," kind of thing. And he whisks her away. We then cut. This is an interesting cut where Bond, for whatever reason, goes to the top of Sugarloaf Mountain, and Holly's there, and they're both looking at with the binoculars, and he hooks up, and she's like CIA, and I'm like, you already knew that.
No, they went up to the top of Sugarloaf Mountain to check out the airport. That's why they're there.
Right, but they knew the stuff was already going to the airport, so it's not like
because movie then.
Yeah, because it's like they already know it's Drax's shipment and stuff. So whatever. So it's kind of weird. So they're up here.
That's the justification within the. Anyway, moving.
Yeah,
on.
yeah. So they're talking, and they tried to join forces. Okay, so they're heading down the mountain on the gondola, on the big gondola thing, or not gondola, a tram, whatever it's called. The name is.
No, it's a gondola. It's a tram. It's a sky boat.
Right. So then Jaws arrives, coming up the other side, having severed their line by biting it with his steel teeth, cutting the cable, which they use licorice as a substitute to make this work, which is kind of
big shout out to Cinema Gulp for pointing that out.
Yes, and Jaws had another henchman who's unnamed who was manning the controls, and who knows where the actual manager of the controls is. Maybe they killed him. I don't know. So Jaws rides his tram up there until it gets even with Bond and Holly's, and he gets out and climbs on top of the roof, and Bond and Holly get on the roof to see what's going on, and they see Jaws, and they kind of smile. Jaws once again smiles at him in a goofy kind of fashion. And she's like, "What, you know him?" And he's like, "Not socially. His name's Jaws. He kills people." So,
I really enjoy that sort of acknowledgement. It's terror, but it's also, I don't know. When Jaws is very scary, he's very scary. But when they want him to be Herman Munster, he is so hard.
Yeah, and you could tell that they cut back and forth between rear projection for the actors' close-ups on set versus
but
on the mountain. The stunt guy again, B.J. Worth, almost fell to his death during filming this scene. It's kind of neat that they did this stuff for real. So there's a fight scene that goes on for a while, and it climaxes with Bond and Holly dangling off the side of the gondola, and Jaws insisting that his henchmen crank up the speed to. I'm not sure what he thinks is going to happen. I guess that because they're dangling underneath it, they would hit the wall while his would go inside. I'm not really sure. But Holly and Bond decide to just simply let go at the last second when the ground is close enough to them. And
also, based on the physics of this entire action sequence, Holly and Bond are dead.
Yeah, they shouldn't survive that. And
they wouldn't survive.
Yeah, so the Jaws is kind of distracted by this. And by the time he realizes it, it's too late to stop the tram, and it's like, well, why didn't the guy who was operating it see that it's speeding right? I don't know. So because
he was as fueled with murder as Jaws was to kill this James Bond fella.
So it crashes. Jaws' Grando crashes into the building, and you see this big 7-Up billboard because we need to be reminded of that. And as it's all collapsing down on him,
the best part of the movie shows up.
Yes, this French girl with blonde hair and pigtails and glasses named Dolly shows up, and she runs us over, and we're meant to believe that she was strong enough to lift this huge, massive steel wheel off of Jaws.
I don't know how much of our audience is into shipping, but I think that Dolly is a superpowered human. Like, I think that she is a very strong person based on her stature. And so I think that she may be a good fit for Jaws. I want happiness for Jaws. He's killed a lot of people, but he's not a bad guy. He's just a bad guy.
So she pushes the thing off, and we have the trademark move by Jaws where he dusts himself off like there's no problem. And he sees her, and at first he looks kind of weird, or like, oh, what's this? And then she smiles at him and shows her pearly whites. And then Jaws smiles and shows the sharp reflection on his teeth. And you have that music, and I'll get to the funny thing in a minute, but it cuts to Bond, and if you look closely, it seems like Bond's actually looking up at them for a second as he's like dusting himself off, as if he thinks, "Oh, how sweet," and And of course, that event with Jaws and Dolly is, to me, it's the best example of the Mandela effect ever, because so many people to this day insist that she had braces on, and that's why Jaws felt comfortable about opening his mouth and smiling, because he has giant steel teeth. It seems obvious that would be the joke, but it turns out no, they didn't. And I think that's simply because it is obvious to so many people that would be the joke, that they just misremembered it that way. Because, and there's crazy people out there who insist that they've digitally removed her braces, like oh, jeez.
I have a brief theory about it.
Yeah.
I think that everyone thinks that because no one watched it for like 20 years.
That's probably it. And so, yeah, because it took, yeah. So he walks off with Dolly, and they join hand in hand, walking away. Bond's kind of happy about that. They don't have to worry about Jaws, and he asks Holly's okay. They start to make out, and this ambulance shows up, and Bond tells the attendants not to mind. And one of them pulls out what looks, it's not even a club, it looks almost like a rolling pin. He hits him on the back of the head. And in a very funny notion, they grab Holly, and she's not even putting up much of a fight, and it's not like they even try and...
Oh, no, they beat the fuck out of her with like 2 clubs.
No, they beat Bond with the clubs. They didn't beat her. They just grabbed her by the wrists and the ankles and sort of pushed her onto the little gurney thing and carrying her away. And then they're in the ambulance, and they're riding up the hill, and they're both...
I give Holly a lot of credit.
The one attendant with them, and he's about to like either kill them or knock them out with some concoction or something, and Bond kind of distracts them with Holly and I can't remember who does what to get out of this, but the long story short, they get...
Well, no, Holly distracts the guard while Bond works the gurney so that he can unhook his straps, and then at which point he pushes a fire extinguisher or an oxygen tank that blasts into the guard's face, and then they fight. That's
right, and he slams him down onto the gurney, kicks him out the door. So literally he's riding on the gurney all the way down the hill, and he crashes into a billboard advertising.
It explodes.
And he's stuck into the billboard with the teeth, and it's really weird. Bond ends up falling out when this happens.
Speaking of Marlboro advertisements, give me 2 seconds. Keep going, though.
So Bond falls out of this. He falls out of the back of the van, and Holly is still in the van, and they take her away, and she's gone. And so Bond just kind of dusts himself off like no big deal, and he continues walking up the hill, and he ends up going to an MI6 headquarters, or not the headquarters, but the section office in Rio. And it once again looks like a place where you shouldn't have a Q branch, but you do. And they repeat some gags like there's a gag where there's a guy sitting crouched down with a sombrero and a poncho, and you can't see his face. And then a button is pressed, and it pops open, and you see that it's not even a real person. It's a machine gun that opens fire. And he's like, oh, have that ready for Army Day. And he was like, have that ready for Army Day, which is a play off of the gag in Spy Who Loved Me, where he's like, have that ready for Achmed's Tea Party. And as Bond is walking through greeting Q, you see a guy with a laser gun, and he's shooting this real life like mannequin, melting the guy's face, and it's really weird. And so they go
but it's a more accurate version of what a laser would do.
Right. So they go into the office, and M's there, and Bond explains, Holly's gone. We know that his planes with his equipment is being flown further north. We don't know where. And Q says, well, I analyzed what you gave me, 007, and it's a concoction which is lethal only to humans, not anything else. And who knows what the logic is there. But Q says it's sourced from this orchid plant, which only exists at this particular place in the Amazon. It's way up there. And so then we just sort of cut to Bond in a motorboat. It looks
as Roger Moore likes to be.
The color scheme is the same as Q's fishing boat from The World Is Not Enough, I noticed. And it looks a little similar, just bigger. Glaston Boats again, the same boat company that provided the boats for Live and Let Die. So they're
that's what Glaston means.
Yes, so they're speeding along through the Amazon River, but then Jaws shows up, and this is where we first see the yellow-suited Moonraker employees. And there's 2 boats following, and there's a few neat gags in here. One of which I could not figure out to this day is that Bond drops a bomb out of the back of his boat and lines it up so that it hits the boat behind him. But when the boat hits it, the explosion happens from inside the boat, not from underneath it or behind it, like when he hits it with a rocket. It's really weird. Jaws tries to catch up with Bond, and you can once again tell there's a lot of bad rear projection because, Jaws wasn't actually out here on the river. And the chase scene goes on for a bit, but it's admittedly not as good as the Live and Let Die chase. It's shorter, though, and it ends at Iguazu Falls, which is odd because Iguazu Falls is located in southern or northern Argentina, which would be south of Brazil, not way up in the Amazon, but whatever, it looks cool. And I like that they actually went here because these waterfalls are amazing. And they actually were going and Bond gets out of it by he hits this button which allows this neat escape where he turns into a hang glider and he takes off and hang glides off the waterfall. And his boat ends up getting caught up on like the rocks, whereas Jaws's boat is getting closer to the falls. And Jaws sees, at first it's funny because he sees Bond take off with the hang glider. He's like, oh, what's this about? Because inexplicably he can't hear the roar of the falls coming up on him. And when he realizes that, he leans down to grab the steering wheel to turn it, but he pulls it so hard it breaks off. Another, Wile E. Coyote type moment. And he's like, ugh, and they just, they go over the cliff. And to their credit, they tried to send a real boat over these waterfalls, but it kept getting caught on the rocks. So they had to use what you could tell are action figures in a toy boat going over a miniature model. And once again, Jaws should be dead from this. I mean, I'm sorry, these falls are huge and the rocks and everything, but movie. So Bond, meanwhile, lands.
Jaws should have been dead in the last movie.
Yeah, so Bond lands his hang glider in the jungle, and he dusts off. He takes his helmet off, and then he sees one of those gorgeous women again, one of Drax's servant women, and he starts following her, and he gets to this temple. It's like a Mayan temple complex, which you wouldn't find in South America because the granite is not there and the bedrock isn't there for those type of temples to exist.
2 seconds.
Yeah, what?
Big shout out for the ladies. So yeah, no, one of the previous servants that were shown in the film, ladies, women who were associated with Hugo Drax. He always shows them off in pairs. And it's like, this is the Lady Chatternet and this is Emma Thompson. And they go away, and then it's like, this is Juliette Lewis and this is Oprah Winfrey. And they go away, and now they're all here. Everyone that you've been introduced to by Hugo Drax is here. The name's not accurate, description's not accurate, but you get what I'm saying.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is that he's walking through the jungle following this woman, and you see this temple which shouldn't be there because they're not in. They filmed it in Guatemala, this area, even though you wouldn't find it in South America, but whatever, movie. So he walks into the temple, and I would argue that this is basically a reference to the Poison Garden from You Only Live Twice. Recently copied over No Time to Die. The design looks almost the same, where you see all the poisonous orchid plants.
Oh, you do too, yeah.
Bond enters in there, and you see all the plants. It's gorgeous. There's a lagoon just like Safin had. You have all the beautiful women there. You have the temple-like architecture, which you have sort of in the Safin's garden, if you will. And it's kind of neat looking because it's a bit of as I mentioned in our Moonraker recap last week, is that the whole climax of No Time to Die is riffed on the climax of Moonraker. If only the climax of Moonraker took place at this Amazon base and didn't end up going to space.
No, Cat, don't waste descriptions of last week's show on this show.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
We got to get clicks for last show. This show is all about.
We're going to get clicks for it. So there's a lot of other highlights to last week's show that aren't on this one. So anyway, he walks in and there's a neat gag, and I think this might be a callback to You Only Live Twice, and a weirdo callback that Bond watches one of the women walk over this bridge. And this bridge looks almost identical to the one that Blofeld had in You Only Live Twice that goes over the piranha pool. And given that people argue that this could be the same continuity, because there have been references to Tracy and stuff like that, and he would be of the right age, people argue that maybe the reason Bond doesn't go over the bridge and starts walking around it through the rocks is because he thinks that, that's a trap. There's going to be a trap door and I'm going to fall. So he walks around the side and he stands on this rock, and all of a sudden it's the rock which flips up and knocks him into the pool. Which I thought was kind of funny. That's how my mind just goes back to that, thinking that might be some kind of wry callback. So instead of having piranha in this pool, it's a python, but it's a very rubber python. And Bond fights the python in a big fight. And you notice that there's certain moments where it looks like it's got him like super tight, and then in the next shot it's like totally loose. And eventually Bond uses that gadget that you spoke of, where he injects it with the sword pen.
Well, it's an injection pen. And yeah, no, it looks silly. And you know what? It looks silly because when Roger Moore was in the centrifuge, that looked painful and dangerous. And now you're giving me a rubber snake? Get out of here.
Yeah, that was a little funny. And no sooner than he finally, and it's kind of weird too that, all the women are just standing around watching, almost like they're like dolls. They're like almost like fake weird people. It's just so creepy.
You know what? I don't even want to know how Hugo Drax is hung. He must be a minotaur.
So No sooner than he kills him, he looks up, and instead of seeing like a beautiful woman standing over him, like Bond saw when he's sitting in the spa, and you only live twice, he looks up and instead he sees Jaws. And the Jaws isn't too happy necessarily, and he reaches down, get close up, pulls him up, and he's holding him there, and Drax suddenly arrives and stops Jaws from killing him, and he's greeting
Suddenly, he's always here. He's our Lord and Savior. We will be saved by Drax. He will take us to the space.
Yeah, so Drax invites Bond into his control room. And again, the control room is high-tech.
I'm sorry. We're getting to the point of the movie where I'm just going to get silly.
Yeah, so he brings him into the control room, and it's very high-tech. It has the atrium-type, a triangular-like design. And like I mentioned, it's not really practical because the screens are on the walls of these angles, and Drax has to look up like this to be able to see them. And you see, hanging from the ceiling in this clear orb is the orchid, and Drax explains his evil plan, or part of it anyway. He says that he sourced this very poisonous thing, has made it so that it's only dangerous to humans, and that the next he mentions that the next great dawn of the human race is going to have blah blah, but he stops short of telling him precisely what's going to happen. And this is where they finally, he reminds us that Bond asks about the central mystery of the film, which is why did you steal your own shuttle? Now, I admit, I thought that was a great hook for this movie, but I felt for the main body of the film, they kind of forgot about it. I don't think they played up that mystery enough. So when so when he brought it up again, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That's what this central. That's why he's even on this mission.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, and so Drax is like, oh, one of my shuttles developed a programming error. There's nothing we could do to fix it, and so I needed to steal my own shuttle back. Because
the reason the whole movie happens is because Hugo Drax needed parts.
I don't get why there's any timetable on this mission. It's like, why didn't you just wait, not steal your shuttle, so that way...
We have to do it by Thursday.
I guess so. And so...
I have a timetable. I want humanity dead.
So Drax doesn't really want to keep going on about this with Bond, so he says, Jaws, Mr. Bond must certainly be cold after his dip in the water. Please take him somewhere where he would be assured of warmth.
Which is another great set. We take James Bond and Dr. Lois.
Yeah, well, he takes her down this hallway, and again, this hallway, that control room they were in...
Do they have a fight?
Impeccably recreated in the GoldenEye Nintendo 64 game. It's amazing.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Yes. And so Jaws takes him and puts him in this, what looks like a cell, and we realize it's a big control room, and Dr. Childs is in there. He's like, oh, or not Dr. Childs. Dr. Holly's in there. And so
good head.
Yeah, so he greets Holly.
And Dr. Fellatio.
Like, James, you're all right. And we had to figure out how to get out of here. And then all of a sudden, a really neat set piece, the table and the chairs fold in and go down below perfectly flat. And it's like, man, that's awesome.
But that was real, wasn't it?
Yeah, they built this stuff for real. It's awesome. And then all of a sudden the doors open above them and they realize they're in the right beneath the Moonraker shuttle. And it's like an exhaust port thing.
Well, and then there's a blue screen thing where Hugo shows up and he's just like, Mr. Bond, I will destroy you once more.
Yeah, he's standing there and he says that, whatever, he's another Bond villainy type thing. And says that you. I wish I could remember. Maybe I should have rewatched it. I can't remember the line.
This movie is such a stereotype.
He is, and he mentions, "Oh, we'll see you later, and you'll no longer be, in my thorn in my side or whatever." And he goes to leave, and as he leaves, you hear all the PA systems, Moonraker 5, right? Blah blah blah. And of course, Bond is already. Sorry, I forgot to mention when Bond was in the control room with Drax, you saw the montage of the shuttles taking off, or that they were talking about setting it up. And so, or talking about the shuttles were about to launch. And in a neat shot, Bond looks up from the shuttle where he sees the shuttle exhausted, and you see the blast doors up above opening. And it's like, that's the exact same design and blast doors and color scheme as the ones in No Time to Die. And it has virtually the same implication that, oh shit, we're fucked. And Bond is like, we got to get out of here. So, of course.
Oh, by the way, we're not sponsored by No Time to Die, but it is available on all your physical medias. Take home No Time to Die on December 21st.
Yes, or December 20th if you live in the UK. And so he uses a gadget to blast their way out of here because, of course, there was a simple cell door that you could just, which doesn't really make any sense because the door that Jaws pushed him through is like a solid steel door. There's no way to get through it. But for some reason, there's this old school old timey jail type bar door, which Bond is able to blow away.
Oh, but that's a cool watch feature. Like, it's kind of like a precursor to the laser watch from GoldenEye when he has the plastic explosives that comes out of it, and it's like stand back, and he blows up the thing. It's a cool gadget. They don't set it up. It's just the thing he has, and you know what? I'm fine with it.
It is. So he sneaks out with Holly, and they go into what looks like a salt mine almost, where you have all the employees are rustling about and getting to the shuttles, and Bond and Holly take out a couple guards. They get in their suits, and they're able to take their places in one of the Moonraker shuttles. And that's when we see the big montage of all of these Moonraker shuttles taking out from these geographically extremely isolated locations around the world. Completely impractical that he would be able to have all these bases top secret, but he does. And I love the music for this scene, by the way. It's really great.
Oh, it's an amazing score.
It's amazing. So they
throughout the entire film, but this specifically,
They take off into space, and they're in space for quite a while as they're getting near to where they're going. And Holly mentions that we don't have to worry because it's on autopilot, which kind of helps explain.
Well, and also she's a trained astronaut.
That's right. So yeah, apparently, so they're flying towards the base, and
that's what I was told.
She's like, and Bond says, "Oh, let's take a look at our." Or Holly's like, "Let's take a look at the cargo," and they see that it's a bunch of Drax's like supermodel people, paired together, and Bond's like, they went into the
kind of looks like a George Michael video.
So she turns it on saying, we got to look at who's in here. We see all these supermodel like people, and Bond's like, so they went onto the Ark 2 by 2. And she's like, what do you mean? Because she still hasn't figured it out yet, apparently. And
because James Bond is smarter.
Yeah, and she hasn't really seen all the evidence yet. So then we have a really great reveal of a space station. It comes out of the dark, and apparently it's built with stealth technology. It's above there. Again, inexplicable movie logic that because the plot demanded it, I suppose, that the shuttle is magical, the station is magically here without anybody knowing. You see all the Moonraker shuttles dock with it, and Bond and Holly kind of discreetly.
They kind of wave it off as being radio jamming.
Yeah, so that's what it is. So you see one of the guys in the outfits move through the 0G environment, and he goes to activate. And I like that they actually go through the steps of showing you how he's doing this. He turns on like the artificial gravity, then everybody goes inside, and then we have the the great scene when Drax is going to give his speech, and all the lights go down, and the spotlight goes on Drax, and he's talking about how they will be been specifically selected to be the progenitors of the next generation of humankind, and that your children will be able to look up into the stars and know there is law and order, which I alone have provided. And I love how he gives this speech in such a dry manner, which is kind of Drax's whole character.
And I do appreciate that. And I really this is one of those Drax moments. I enjoy the fact that Moonraker is absolutely upfront about the villain.
Yes.
And when we get here, it's like, I don't know why you people are following, but you're all good looking.
And so Bond and Holly decide that they're not going to wait around any longer to see what's going on. So they sneak around because somebody mentions the radar jamming. So they go through the ship through the station.
Yeah, but this is also a carbon copy of getting out of the submarine in the last movie.
So they go through the station, and they find that in the very bottom, they go down this ladder, and they find these guys in there, and you have this fight scene where she kind of takes them out, and Bond actually kind of stops just to watch her instead of helping for a bit.
Oh, yeah, no, Holly can she can fight.
Yeah, she can, and he's just kind of watching, like, oh, surprised that a woman's able to fight. And so they destroy
Apparently, Anya was a pussy.
Yeah, they destroy.
Anyway, so they destroy the radar, and that makes it so that it becomes completely visible, like the space station in the orbit of Earth. Now it is seen by NASA, the National Aeronautics Space Administration.
Yes, it is. And I guess they have a Space Force on hand because they immediately all get their troops and board a space shuttle, and they take off. And it apparently gets here within the space of a few minutes. And Drax, he's told over the radio that there's a...
Stop it. Wait a second. I just realized how unrealistic it was to launch the Space Marines.
Just now, really?
Just now.
Okay, so the Space Marines are coming in, and there's a great shot where Drax kind of looks out from beside his viewfinder, and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, well, the radar jamming."
Space Marines.
They're like, check the radar jamming, and the radar jamming is destroyed, and he sends his troops out there because I guess they just have troops on hand. And they get in, and then you have the big fight where you have a bunch of Space Marines and a bunch of Moonraker people firing lasers at each other, and it's ridiculous. But then Drax finally gets down to business, and you see the spheres and the globes inside there, and he says that each globe is capable of killing 100 million people, because Bond and Holly at this point have been caught by Jaws and brought back before him, and so he's talking, and then he launches the first globe, and then it takes off, and then the fight continues, and Bond decides that he's going to turn the tables on this, and because Drax wants Jaws to throw Bond and Holly out the airlock, and he says, "Oh, Holly, you will achieve your dream of becoming the first woman in space." And he tells Jaws to throw him out, and Bond says, "Oh, if I may, Drax, your entire, your whole philosophy means that you're only going to have the best absolute specimens, recommended for, this mission of repopulating the Earth, correct?" He's like, "Yeah, so what?" And he's like, "Well, so you selected people for their skills and for their certain physical traits?" He's like, "Oh, yes, of course." It's like, so then that means, if I'm understanding you correctly, that certain people of higher standards will be terminated. And Drax is like, "Well, yeah, of course." And Jaws, of course, is listening. And it even cuts to Dolly, and she kind of looks over her shoulder wondering, like, what's going on, because she sees she's clearly out of her element here.
We're going to talk about Dolly after the fact.
Yes. And so Bond is like, okay. And he's like, "Okay, Jaws, throw him out the airlock." And he's not doing anything. He's hesitating. And he's like, "Jaws, you obey me. And now expel them." And Jaws still won't do anything. And then Drax is like, "Expel him." And he's like the only guy I know who could raise his voice and get that angry with his face not like changing expression at all. He does.
Oh no, but that's so strange.
It is.
It is. No, but okay. No, when Hugo Drax says, "Jaws, you obey me," I'm just like, oh, that is a nightmare.
Right. And so Jaws finally, he's like, "Okay," and he kind of gestures to these other guys to do it. And then he kind of pathetically, elbows these guys, and they turn their guns on.
Oh, he beats the fuck. Jaws kicks ass.
And he hits like one guy, and then it's like, oh shit. So then Bond decides he's gonna do something about it. I can't remember exactly what Bond does, but he does something to get to the anti-gravity thing, and he shuts off the artificial gravity, and it's ridiculous.
Like we at the Martinis, Gadgets and Guns YouTube show, we would like to apologize for not the specificity of how James Bond got to the anti-gravity thing.
Yes, he got over there to do that, and he's told that the next globe is ready to go. He's like, "Proceed," and they keep moving, and then finally Bond gets to the anti-gravity thing, sets it off, and then everything's getting. And then this is where not only does the movie like the go into slow motion, but the music changes really, and like really great music. And eventually they turn the gravity thing back on, but not after Jaws, Holly, and Bond and Dolly kind of get away, and they open the doors, and then in come the Space Marines who fought their way inside, and you have the big battle inside. And this movie, by the way, still holds the world record for the most people in zero gravity wires ever in a movie.
Nice.
Yes. And so this big battle scene keeps going on, and in a bit of an interesting moment, Bond corners Drax, because Drax is like, he doesn't have a gun and he's not one to fight, and he's running down the side corridor, and Bond has him cornered, and even knowing that he's probably defeated, Drax is still like stoic and only barely showing signs of cracking. And he has a gun on Bond, and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna die," whatever. And of course, Bond raises his hands to pretend that he's surrendering, and he uses the dart to shoot him in the heart. And according to Q, the cyanide dart will kill you in 30 seconds. So Bond opens the door. He's like, "Oh, allow me. Take one giant step for mankind." And he pushes him into the airlock. And then he closes him in and opens it, and Drax is sucked out into space, and he dies. I
really like the little ant, like miniature. Yes. Now, I really like that spinning guy. I like it's adorable.
I did not like that. That's how he killed him, because he does not have any reaction. Drax does not have any reaction to getting knocked into the airlock and out into space, because he's already been hit with the cyanide. Mm-hmm. So I thought it would have been better if Bond, while he was still not struck by cyanide, to actually just be thrown out the airlock, or what would be more poetic and justified is if he got killed by his own gas grenades. I just felt that would have been more on point, because it just doesn't seem like it has much of an effect on Drax after he gets hit by the dart. He's just kind of like, "Okay, out we go," for the sake of it.
I agree with you that he should have been killed by his own gas grenades.
Yeah.
That would have been a more appropriate ending to Hugo Drax. But I do like the callback to the initial, this guy.
Yeah, they used it already once when he was in the
And also being blown into space. Nobody doesn't like, come on. Everyone likes somebody being blown into space.
Bond rendezvous with the Space Marines, and they assure him that they've shut down the system, so there's no other globes can be fired. They have everything under control, and the place is going to be blown to smithereens. So Bond
Yes.
So Bond orders them to evacuate, just like he did in Spy Who Loved Me. So they start evacuating.
Flat out remake.
Bond and Holly and Jaws spot three of the last globe having made its escape, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna have to catch up." And so Bond and Holly get in the shuttle, but they can't get out because all the explosions have caused the lock arm to get stuck. And so Jaws and Holly, who are just kind of, or Dolly, who are like, in the hall, they're like waving at Bond like nothing's going on, like hi, and Bond signals to them on the radio. He's like, "Jaws, we're trapped. Can you save us?" And then Dolly, this is like a running joke with her. She doesn't say, you don't hear her say anything in the movie, but she does speak, and she speaks into Jaws' ears like, and then he's listening. He's like, "I got this." And so and I have no idea where the camera is.
So apparently Dolly is a mechanical genius.
But Bond and Holly
knows how to unhook things.
But Bond and Holly are able to magically cut to this camera, which is perfectly placed at the exact spot where it needs to be, so they can watch Jaws not use his teeth this time, but use just his brute strength to break the bar. Their shuttle's able to get away. Bond and Jaws and Holly and Dolly sit down, and there's champagne here apparently, and so he pops the champagne with Dolly, and they pour these little wine glasses, and he says, first lines ever, he's like, "Well, cheers to us," and they chink glasses, and it's kind of cool that he can talk, he just chooses not to because like why bother. So they jog, and then you see that his portion of the space station kind of breaks away, so they're like in a safe pod, so they'll be safe. Bond and Holly, meanwhile, take off after the globes, and this part I didn't think was as suspenseful as it could have been. Like they take out the first two relatively easily with the guns, and
it's kind of this is the part where it actually becomes a little bit too much Star Wars.
Yeah, it drags a bit, and they're lining it up, and she's like, "James, this is the last chance in the world to be," like okay, so they destroy the last one, and that's fantastic. We then cut down to the NASA guys, and they're saying that there's a life raft of sorts was picked up from the shuttle, and a tall man and a short blonde woman. And it's like, okay, Jaws and Dolly are safe. And so then M and Q are there, and they ask to see Bond, and they hack into his camera, and they see Bond and Holly and Zero G making out, and Q isn't watching the screen, and Q's looking at the map to see where their shuttle's going, and M's like, "My God, what's Bond doing?" And Q's like, and one of the best innuendo jokes I think in the entire series, "I think he's attempting re-entry, sir," because he's looking at the screen and not the camera,
not the screen.
Right, yeah. And then Bond kind of looks up and he does a double take when he sees they're on camera, and he doesn't let that bother him too much. He just throws the camera out of shuts the camera down, and Holly's like, "Oh, James, take me around the world one more time," and he's like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And so then they go around the world, and you see or hear the like you mentioned, the disco version of the Moonraker song,
which is great.
I actually think as much.
So okay, wait, Kat. Before we move on, what comes next?
For Your Eyes Only.
Does it say that at the end?
Yes, it does.
Okay, then what were you saying?
I actually, despite the amount of flack this movie gets for ripping off Star Wars, it did work to their benefit because the production budget was $34 million. The film ended up, I'm not sure how much the marketing budget was, but it made $210 million, which is a record which was held till GoldenEye. So they did a good job making money, and as much flack as it gets for Star Wars, and I get it, they're ripping it off, and it's ridiculous.
I don't think they're ripping it off. I think they're ripping off Thunderball, and they're just putting it in space. I don't think they're doing anything that is all that outlandish.
They rip off the Spy Who Loved Me and the You Only Live Twice. It's that same plot again.
Right, but I like they're introducing in space, but like just because you have a space station doesn't necessarily make you a ripoff of 2001.
Right, but we know the reason they did this was only because of Star Wars.
Of course. We all wanted the sweet, sweet Star War.
And the Space Marines and the big space battle with laser guns.
But the reason I get so upset about it, or at least the reason that I get so passionate about it, is because I think that they're actually like, it's interesting how they crashed a James Bond into the Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, they were able to use the lasers and the space stations and the rockets and all that jazz, but that's not out of the realm of James Bond to begin with. Like, we already had in You Only Live Twice, as this is a ripoff.
I'm not saying it's out of line. I'm just saying it's obvious that they're doing this solely to rip off Star Wars, because that's what was popular at the time, science fiction, which is why.
Well, I don't know about you, Kat, but I'm a broccoli and I like money.
Yeah, but I didn't say that. If you let me finish and didn't interrupt me to begin with, I would have told you that despite the amount of flack this movie gets for ripping off Star Wars, it's actually pretty good for a Bond movie. The villain is...
Oh, so we agree.
Yeah, if you'd actually listened, you would have realized that we agreed. So
I do this a lot. I'm so sorry.
So the villain is excellent. I like that you really feel the tension of his actual plan. And the fact that he's so off the level and socially awkward and weird just makes it more believable and just creepy. And they never do tell you why he wants to do what he's doing. He's just doing it anyway. And again, they riffed a lot on the climax of that movie for this movie. But it works in this film. And it's a really fun movie. I do think that the sequence when they go to Venice and Rio, that slows down a lot for me. Some of it gets a little clunkier than it needed to be. And because those sequences are not even talking about the central mystery of the film, it feels like it's dragging more. Like, I felt like when he was at Drax's estate and the Enterprises, that he was still, and that was still the mystery was still, top of the top of the story at that point. And I felt that it kind of fell by the wayside a bit when they went off to Venice and Rio.
Well, it's a very interesting point that you make in terms of those locales. I think it is more exotic locations, and it is like, I think in the Roger Moore era, and especially when we get here in the Roger Moore era, 1979, like, we are looking at, like, things are getting tired, and we are basically just hanging out with Uncle Roger. And we are falling back on the formula.
Yeah, we are. And the formula isn't really a bad thing. It's just that...
No.
The things which hurt it, like we mentioned, there were those moments where Roger was really out of character for his version of Bond. Again, I myself thought it slowed down a bit in the middle, but the climax I kind of liked. I think the action on the Lippris for The Spy Who Loved Me was better, but... I like that they don't have to go to a separate location to deal with Drax, because The Spy Who Loved Me, you have all that great action at the Lippris, and then it kind of takes a breather before they go to Atlantis to finish it. Whereas here, all the action is at the space station with Drax and everything. I like that, because
this is my favorite part about, like, Drax is all over Moonraker in this movie. Like, you do not have to question who the bad guy is. It's just like, oh my God. He's always around. He's a blanket of terror. Like, I don't think he's a good guy, and I think James Bond is doing a piss poor job at stopping him until he finally stops him.
Yeah, and so that was
Moonraker.
I didn't really like Dr. Holly Goodhead. I thought she was kind of boring and bland. I know they wanted.
I
know they wanted Jacqueline Smith for the role, and they couldn't get her because she was with Charlie's Angels. She probably would have been better. I still think
that Lois Chiles did a good job. I think she did a good job.
She also has those weird lines like, "Oh, your side introduces you, Mr. Bond," and "Oh, something must have gone wrong with the controls." There was another line in there too. I can't remember what it was. Something else. We probably mentioned it last week, but there's weird bits like that. I didn't really care for her. I like Jaws. Drax is just amazing. Like I said, he's elevates the film even more. And I think that's really needed, especially for a central villain who's used a lot in the movie. So I think it's better than most people give it credit for, but it still has a few issues here and there.
Oh, I agree with you. I think that it deserves more credit. I think more people should revisit it, not dismiss it as the parody that it is commonly thought of, because I don't think it's a parody. I think it is an earnest attempt at bringing, like...
It's not science fiction, it's science fact.
To quote the philosopher Broccoli.
Yes. So Anything else to say, or are we going to Martinis?
Well, no. How many martinis you want to give it?
You go first.
7.
I'm teetering on a. Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 7 as well. I think that was last week I said 6. I'm going to change it to 7 because it is actually a good movie, and I would have elevated it higher, but it slows down a lot in the middle for me. But so yeah, I'll give it 7 martinis out of 10. Anything else to cover for Moonraker?
Well, no, but what are we doing next week? What do you got?
Fear Eyes Only, for real this time.
For real this time? You swear to... Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Kat, do you have anything else going on that you'd like to...
No, I mean, other episode, again, I have my other show, The Unifying Force, on the Virtual Cantina YouTube channel. That's a Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel. That's every second and fourth Sunday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific. Other than that, just come back for Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns.
Well, but you've been doing the Mandalorian recaps and everything.
That's right. I've been doing those too, Mandalorian recaps. Those don't have as much of a set schedule, but you can go to the Positive Fandom channel where you'll see me talking about that with RM. Those are fun. We're recapping the Mandalorian, all the Mandalorian episodes leading up to the Book of Boba Fett, so that's really cool. And I was on Cinema Gulp recently for Ghostbusters Afterlife, so check that out.
Oh my heavens. But what's your favorite show? Is it a James Bond show that I'm on?
It is Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns.
We will see you next time for Your Eyes Only. Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns as James Bond will return.